I remember each and every day very specifically because of what happened in each day. Each day there was something different. That night we took the president's body to Bethesda, and they had an autopsy performed there. Then we brought him back to the White House, and Mrs. Kennedy was there with the body. And then the next morning, she contacted me because she wanted to go to Arlington National Cemetery. She decided that's where he would be buried. Most of the members of the family wanted him to be buried in Boston, but she made a decision that Arlington National Cemetery was the appropriate place. And so I took her and her brother-in-law, Robert Kennedy, and two of the president's sisters, and we went to Arlington National Cemetery, and they met with the Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, and picked out the gravesite. And that was this day after. That was on the 23rd. And then on the 24th, which was Sunday, they had a mass in the White House, and then we took the body of the president up to the U.S. Capitol to place it in state there. And then on the 25th, Monday, which happened also to be John F. Kennedy Jr.'s third birthday, which was the day that his father was buried. And we went and I took Mrs. Kennedy and the two brothers up, and we brought the casket back to the White House, just passed by, picked up about 100 heads of state, and walked from the White House to St. Matthew's Cathedral, where the funeral services were held. And then we went to Arlington National Cemetery for the interment services, and then brought Mrs. Kennedy back to the White House because she wanted to have a reception for each and every one of those 100 or so visiting heads of state and heads of government. And then she told me that she thought she would want to go back to the cemetery later. And so around 11 or 11:30 that night, I took she and the president's brother back to the cemetery so they could be there alone. It was very private, and they spent some time there at the gravesite in Arlington National Cemetery. Well, I was so busy I didn't have time to deal with it, to be honest with you. It wasn't until 1970 when I was given a desk job. I was promoted to Deputy Assistant Director of Protective Operations. And that gave me time to think because I was behind a desk all day long, planning logistics and everything else. And what I thought about was what had happened in Dallas, why it had happened, how did we permit it to happen, because we failed. We had a responsibility to keep the president from being assassinated, and we were not able to do that. And it just started to really eat at me. And it got worse and worse and worse. By 1975, I failed a physical exam because my emotional problems caused by this trauma just caused my physical problems too. And I couldn't pass the physical, so they retired me. That was 1975. Then I did a TV show for 60 Minutes, and I broke down on camera. And from that point on, I just deteriorated. And it wasn't until 1982 when a doctor friend of mine told me that I had to either quit what I was doing because I was really drinking myself to death, and I just lived on cigarettes and tobacco, or cigarettes and alcohol. And I decided I wanted to live, so I just quit cold turkey, everything. And I started to get better. And over a long period of time, I improved gradually. It was really gradual. I went back to Dallas in 1990. That helped. But it wasn't until 2009 when I started to talk about what had happened in Dallas with a young writer named Lisa McCubbin. Up until that point, I had not discussed the assassination with anyone. My family, my friends, fellow agents, we didn't talk about it. When I started to talk to her about it, over a period of time, she gained my trust. I really felt that I could trust her. She was willing to listen, and that was the most beneficial thing that happened to me. My ability to get that information out and release it. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The more I talked about it, the better I felt. Then I was convinced to write a book. And so I wrote a book called Mrs. Kennedy and Me. And then we took that book around the country and publicized it. And I had to talk about it, and the more I talked about it, the better I felt. People asked questions. I was very willing to answer them and still am. And then they came to me and asked me to write another book called 5 Days in November, specifically about those 5 days in the Texas trip in 1963. And that was also beneficial. So I really can say that talking about it and writing the book has really been beneficial to me.